One thing that the coronavirus pandemic has ensured is that certain things have permanently changed, one of which is the normalization of remote work and video conferencing. These technologies existed before the coronavirus, of course, but there was never a critical mass of people using them, and a critical mass is certainly needed for a network-based technology such as this one. Any network-based technology increases in value as a square of the number of nodes, not simply because of the number of nodes. And this graphic from the Wikipedia article about the network effect, about Metcalfe's law, which is linked in the description box below, explains how as you get more nodes to the network, the value of the network rises exponentially, not linearly. For this reason, since the pandemic forced enough people to work remotely and to adapt to that norm and become more productive in doing so, a lot of people are going to partially work from home permanently. They may go back to their office 2 days a week rather than the previous 5 days a week, but the other 3 might involve working from home. And that is a very good thing because you've introduced flexibility into the lives of at least office workers. Now, a lot of people who have to do face-to-face jobs, such as food service or medical professionals and so forth, obviously can't do that, but a large portion of the workforce can in fact do that. And this is a natural progression of technological progress because you have increased standards of living, productivity, and dematerialized a certain activity, that is to say commutes. Even if only a fraction of the workforce can work from home, they're not on the roads on nearly as many weekdays, and therefore traffic jams will be a lot less. Traffic jams might very well be far less frequent than they used to be before March of 2020. And it's quite possible that no highways, at least in the United States, ever need to be widened again. And since the high-tech functionality of video conferencing is very dematerialized and very technologically pure, it advances very quickly, and therefore the video conferencing capabilities 2 years from now will be considerably more advanced than today because it is inherently a very fast-moving and fast-improving technology. Things like bandwidth, video compression, live streaming of data, and so forth all are improving very rapidly, whereas the commute experience is something that is not improving. Therefore, the qualitative delta continues to widen as the video conferencing capability improves and the network effect of more and more people on video conferencing improves. Now, with that backgrounder, let's examine some of the shamefully and comically regressive ideas that a lot of these economist eggheads come up with, and how openly they display that they are entirely theoretical creatures. They have no connection to the real economy or to real people at all. They are so theoretical that at some point it just defies description how bad their ideas are and how easily they ignore all kinds of evidence that would indicate how poor this idea is. So Deutsche Bank proposes a 5% tax, that is an income tax, on people still working from home after the pandemic. Now, first of all, 5% is not a small increase. That is probably the minimum unit size for these very zealous socialist types, and a lot of these economists are in fact socialists. You may find this hard to believe, but remember, economists are super theoretical and don't understand that humans will respond to incentive and adapt around a lot of very pernicious disincentives. So they think 5% tax is just a trivial thing. That's their minimum unit of tax increase. Now remember, that's a lot more than you think. If your marginal tax rate is already 50%, meaning you only take home 50% of your pre-tax pay, another 5% increase takes your post-tax take-home down from 50% to 45%. So you're taking home 10% less than you were before the tax. So this 5% increase that they propose would mean a 10% reduction in your income. But it gets worse. Their whole rationale is that the people who are working from home are not spending money near their office, like going for lunch and going for coffee and things like that. Never mind, they might be doing this near their home location, but for some reason they're not contributing to where the office buildings are, therefore they deserve to be taxed. And even worse, the people who produce these types of ridiculous recommendations and research reports, so literally a team of 20-something economists get together and produce this type of garbage and think they are so brilliant for coming up with such a horrible idea. They actually say things like, well, because parents are spending more time with their children at home, therefore daycare centers are getting less business, therefore we have to tax parents who spend time at home with their children. The notion of a daycare center itself was perhaps the wrong idea. Maybe parents should have been able to spend more time with their children because work was more flexible. But no, they have to preserve the daycare center and therefore interfere via government with parents spending too much time at home with their children because they can work from home, or a married couple with children. If one parent can work from home on one day and another parent can work from home on a different day, then maybe the whole week can be managed with at least one parent at home because each parent goes to their main office on a different day of the week or something like that. Those types of arrangements can easily form, and that is very natural. That is good. That is good for parents, good for children, good for society. A fact that a lot of PhD economists think that this has to be obstructed through government intervention and taxation tells you all you need to know about their mindset. I'll still generously say they're not bad people, but they are so theoretical that they truly have no idea how utterly ridiculous their recommendations usually are. So 5% tax for people still working from home. And never mind that by having less traffic on the road, there's less gasoline consumption, less pollution, less environmental damage. So the economists obviously don't care about that. But another group that deserves to be scorned are these so-called environmentalists. They will advocate all kinds of weird and esoteric causes, but when there actually is something that might benefit the environment, they're nowhere to be found. They should be defending the work from home trend because more people are working from home and therefore not driving on the road consuming fossil fuels. But environmentalists are nowhere to be found when there's actually something that they should be getting behind that has happened in the economy. So funny how that works. Similarly, you don't see any environmentalists organizing to protest Bitcoin, even though Bitcoin uses 0.6% of the entire world's electricity, which is a huge amount of electricity. 0.6% of the entire world's electricity, but environmentalists are nowhere to be found. I have other videos about that topic. So if you read this article, you will see how poor their rationales are, and even things like daycare centers and nannies will go out of business is not something they necessarily advocate in this article. It's been filtered out for a mainstream site like CNBC. But if you do other searches, you find these are the things they advocate, that, oh, we can't have daycare centers go out of business because parents are spending too much time at home. And then they also say that it will raise taxes that can be distributed to low-income people. So again, they're just trying to find new ways to justify a punitive redistributionist scheme, which is to say just trying to repackage socialism as something else under some esoteric notion of justice. And a lot of these PhD economist types are actually hired just to create complicated rationales to justify very crude and unoriginal ideas, such as forced redistribution of wealth via governments. And they say taxes will be raised as if people will never adapt their behavior around it. What's even worse is they don't know how a lot of private sector companies even work. Even though they're employed by Deutsche Bank, ostensibly a private sector organization, but they still have an economist, egghead think tank operating within their walls for some reason. And they're not familiar enough with tech companies, for example, which already have many workers in geographically decentralized locations. A lot of Silicon Valley companies do have salespeople and other staff that work in different states even. And they've worked effectively with the headquarter office through various communication technologies, such as Zoom and other video conferencing. Only now is Zoom going to the real mainstream involving hundreds of millions of people. So these eggheads don't even understand that many corporations already have people who do not work out of the headquarters office at all. Secondly, the first principles of economics and technology, which you can never expect one of these economist types to understand, is that the pressure is always towards freer capital and less taxation of capital and lowering of costs. Therefore, the remote work revolution frees people from being forced to live in an expensive area that is expensive only for reasons of commuting to workplace. If you only go to the office half as often, you can live twice as far away and still have the same amount of driving per week. By being able to double your distance, you quadruple the land area in which your housing choice resides, quadrupling your land area through doubling your distance. And therefore, it's much easier to live in an affordable place because your office might be 70 miles away, but you're not going there 5 days a week. You might be going there 2 days a week. And once that starts to happen, you see a hollowing out of certain unnecessarily expensive real estate that was expensive only for reasons of scarcity mentality. That's exactly the type of thing that technology busts. We have seen other examples of this in other sectors of the economy in videos on this channel. And then you get to the even more interesting thing, real estate repricing, but furthermore, people crossing jurisdictional lines and state lines for tax efficiency purposes. As we all know, a state like California has an extremely high income tax, but there's a neighboring state with a 0% income tax, that being Nevada. The reason people cannot live in Nevada, even if their job is in California, is because all the desirable parts of California are about 200 miles away from Nevada's border. There's no part of Nevada that is less than 200 miles from the Pacific Ocean. But now when you have something like Zoom, then slowly people adapt, and instead of 5 days a week, it becomes 2 days a week, 1 day a week, and then 1 day every 2 weeks. And they just are able to extend the distance they live from their work enough to cross state lines. And then you have a certain freedom from the chaining effect that has enabled high-tax locations to keep their tax rates high. Similarly, in Europe, countries like the UK and France have very high taxation, but Europe has a lot of tax havens as well. Until recently, those tax havens were only available to billionaires who were completely location independent. But now through the Zoom revolution, you can have mid-level corporate employees also leave and live in a tax haven and therefore be in a low-tax structure of their own personal income, because places like Luxembourg are very near to both London and Paris, but it's a tax haven. It has a lot lower tax than the UK or France. Similarly, Monaco, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, these are all tax havens that are pretty near to major population centers, and a lot of people with jobs in those population centers might just be able to live in a tax haven that is not very far away, but it was not a commutable distance if you're going to commute 5 days a week. If you're only going 1 or 2 days a month, all this becomes possible. So this revolution is unstoppable, and the fact that a bunch of PhD economists come up with the quote-unquote bright idea of increasing income tax 5% on remote workers is truly a shameful thing. And to give you other examples, these are the people who 200 years ago would have said, destroy all textile machines in order to preserve jobs for the people who did textile work by hand. And these are also the people who would say that, hey, let's go around breaking windows so that GDP increases through the surge of window repairs that follow. They would just look at a spreadsheet of what activity has an increase on GDP and recommend it accordingly, with no irony that, if you're breaking windows, you're not really improving society, and that is not truly economic growth, even if the stat that they track without any context around that stat would technically improve if you went around doing that. So that is why a lot of these people are truly so out of touch with how the real economy works and the concerns of real people that it's quite worrisome. Fortunately, there are a lot of rebuttals to this horrible idea online, and the advocates of this idea have truly been slaughtered in a lot of rebuttal articles. That's why I say that remote workers should in fact be paid more, not less. They're reducing the extent to which they pollute the environment. They're reducing traffic, thereby not forcing hundreds of other people to be jammed in traffic due to their contribution to excess traffic. They are reducing road deaths because by driving less, you're less likely to be in a car accident. They're allowing the exurb communities to prosper more because more people can live on the real outskirts of a metropolitan area. And since these are higher income people, their contribution to their local economy of their new location is very high, a pretty high multiplier effect. So I would say their net contribution to the economy is technically more, not less. And under a basic understanding of economics, which, as I said, is sadly absent from many people with very fancy credentials in economics because they're too theoretical, it makes complete sense that remote workers should be paid more, not less, especially if the employer can shed a lot of expensive office space because there are fewer workers in the office. Office real estate is very expensive, especially in prime areas. If they can shed this office space, then those savings should be passed to workers and under natural market forces would be. And this is already happening, in fact. I'll have more on this topic in other videos, but as you can tell, the people who stand athwart the natural inclination of humanity to progress and advance and improve its standard of living are in fact quite creative in devising new ways to obstruct human flourishing and human progress. And that is one of the themes of this channel, calling them out and encapsulating their bad idea in a way that people in the future will be able to make fun of them more easily. If you like this type of content, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, and thank you very much for watching.